Wow. You can't pay for that. All right, you guys, we are back, and now we'd like to welcome our virtual audience. So everybody, let's say hi to the virtual audience out there. Yoo-hoo! As you can see, we have a great group of people here. We're having a lot of fun, but we do want to get started. And now with our virtual audience, we're going to give you about a 35-minute clip of what actually goes on at one of these shows. Now, everybody here already sort of knows the concept is workflow. What happens from the capture all the way to the delivery. But right now, we are going to go ahead and bring one of our friends, Jack, up in just a second. Before I get to that point, I do want to thank a few people. We certainly want to thank our live audience because you guys made an investment to be here, and we really do appreciate your time. I know that we've already got through half the program and had a lot of fun, but this is the best part because as much as I like my segment, Jack is here to blow your mind. You have 3 solid hours of tips and tricks and tools that you can use to shorten your time. So do want to thank Jack. I also want to thank all of our wonderful sponsors. Most people know that we could not produce these shows if it weren't for their help. So we do thank them. And finally, my crew. I always tell people this, but I could definitely do this with just a projector and a laptop, but they go far out of their way to make this a beautiful presentation. They try very hard to make sure that visually you're inspired, not just by the words, but by the entire content of this program. So, as you know, we have some great sponsors. I don't have time to thank them all, but certainly want to give a shout out to some of the big ones. Canon, Adobe, Bayphoto, Fineo, fantastic to have you guys here. We appreciate everything you do to help us provide this education for the people that we work for. A couple quick reminders, please do follow us on Facebook. In fact, if you're not already a fan, go to my fan page because we'll be giving away a bunch of prizes today. And with that, if you want to win a prize, you have to go to Facebook and you have to tell us what you like about what Jack is teaching you, and we're going to be giving away some big prizes at the end of the show, so you don't want to miss that. We're also going to be giving some big prizes to our audience, including a copy of Lightroom 4, as well as a copy of Photoshop CS6. So that's going to be some pretty cool prizes there as well. Now, I want to remind everybody, we're here to be a complete program. What we try to do is come up with one topic and cover everything we can in about a 5.5 to 6 hour presentation. So the live audience here is about halfway through that. Those of you who are joining us at home, you're going to get only about 35 minutes of this. So if you like what you see, I would definitely recommend joining us for one of our last few shows. If you can't join us, the show is available for purchase as a download on the site youcando.com. So UKANDU.com. You can get this show and watch it anytime you want, as many times as you want. Now, with your permission, as I mentioned, we are going to give away some prizes. Both myself and Jack have some great giveaways tonight. The audience has already won quite a few things. I will be giving a membership away to SPU at the end of this show, as well as a disc that has 100 of my favorite templates. That disc is available with an SPU membership. If you join today at $74, you will receive that disc as well. For all of the SPU members out there who are already a member, I know you want that disc too. If you just send us an email and let us know that you are interested in that disc, you just have to re-sign up for 3 more months and you also can walk away with that disc. We also finally got our t-shirts, and we have a bunch of you in the audience wearing them, the SPU members. Says I love SPU, and of course we have this on the back. So if you're here in the audience and you want to know about SPU, feel free to ask somebody in the t-shirt what they, why they're members and what they get out of that. Now, I love this quote: creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes, and it's knowing which ones to keep. Our goal tonight is to teach you about how to be an artist, but not just recognize the work, but to truly select and refine and hone those certain images that are going to become the sellable work that you have. So I am very, very excited to present to you. I know you got a little tidbit of Jack talking to you before the show started, for those of you who were here early. Now you are about to meet somebody who is absolutely brilliant. This man has been in this industry for so many years, and he also has been a part of the Adobe process for the evolution over since the beginning of time. In fact, he is one of the Adobe gurus. He teaches all over the world, and I'm very excited to bring Jack, wherever Jack is, up on stage. Jack, yay, Jack! All right, how's that?
I know. We've got family members in the house. Aunt Marge, Uncle Jim, thank you so much for coming.
And thank you for the for the fudge that you brought. And did you promise them this new Mark III in order to be that responsive?
Your Mark III. That's
no,
right.
not my Mark III.
I'm Nikon.
I got my new toy right before I got out here. So, all right. Well, Jack is way too humble. So I could stand here forever and tell you about the things that he can do. The one thing that I will tell you is the stuff you're going to learn today is mind-blowing. People, I sit there and watch the audience faces and just see them light up. And I hear the word wow. I know why you got your name, the Jack Photoshop Wow Guy, because he
Copyright, trademark.
Copyright and trademarked. He will blow your mind. In fact, I told you this story, but I'm going to let our virtual audience know. When we did the very first show, my own image artist, she's been with me for 16 years, done 12 years in digital technology. He did a segment on head swaps. Are you going to share that with this audience tonight?
If they're good.
If you're good. He did a segment on head swaps, and I'm not kidding. At the end of that segment, she literally laid her head down on the table, and I turned and looked at her, and I said, "What is wrong?" And she said, "I have wasted so much of my life." So just know that he's going to blow your mind. He's going to give you time, and time is why we do this. So Jack, tell a little bit about yourself, and I'm going to step away, and Jack's going to take over.
Thank you. Well, again.
Thank you.
Thank you again for having me. Excited to be here. I feel very privileged to be associated with Sandy and her tour, and to be here with you all. My background, like some of you, again, we chatted a little bit before we got started, in photography started in yearbook staff in high school. So going way back to rolling my own film in the darkroom and everything else is where I got the bug, and has continued on for most of my life. And then this little thing called the personal computer, specifically the Macintosh, came out in 1984 and moved me out of my career in advertising and graphic design into computer graphics and computer imagery, and seeing how far creative professionals can use the tools to get work done and to do stuff that was not possible before the advent of the computer. So I've been at it for a while, did the Photoshop Wow books, the How to Wow books, have about 1.5 million copies in print in 12 languages, Photoshop Hall of Fame, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Let's get going. Sandy also mentioned the reason why we're here is to talk about not only production and workflow, and those can have kind of a negative connotation at times to them, because it's work. The reason why we do work is to pay the bills. The reason why you guys are photographers is because you're an artist and you didn't want to do real work, right? You certainly can't do math, right? You can't do math, so you went right into photography, and you've been there ever since. And that's an exciting thing, to be an artist. And for my sake, everything that we'll be talking about, even though I do a lot of special effects, I do a lot of tips and techniques, and I often go over the top in terms of my effects because I know you guys can always dial them back down, so in case I go a little bit overboard with vignettes and other things like that, you guys are so good. Even though I sometimes go overboard, remember, keep in the back of your mind or the forefront of your mind, everything that you do is to strengthen the story that you're telling with your imagery. That's the purpose. It's not about effects. It's not about throwing little, tricks at your audience. It's about what can you do to that image to make it as potent as possible to tell the most powerful story about your subject matter. For you guys that are commercial photographers, that's obviously dealing with a client. Somebody's going to write you a check. So what are you going to do to make that as powerful as possible? In other areas, it may be for your own photography, your own landscape work, or family work, or travel, or whatever else you do. The idea is, how can we make that as powerful as possible? So that's what I'm going to be focusing on right now. And I think what I'm going to start off with, we've got there's a little slideshow just to show some samples. Yes, that's me back. Wasn't quite high school, but, oh, I had hair. How cute is that? What a concept. Okay, but starting in on what we're able to do with our images. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on the brand new Lightroom 4 and Photoshop CS6. And of course, Photoshop CS6 ships with the new Adobe Camera Raw, known as Adobe Camera Raw 7. For those of you who haven't played with it, you've always had it. It's actually built into the bridge, and that's why you'll never find a program called Adobe Camera Raw sitting anywhere on your computer. And so the great thing about what Adobe has done by releasing both Lightroom 4 and now Adobe Camera Raw 7 with CS6 is that there is complete compatibility between those two processing engines. And they completely rewrote the processing engine for the new incarnations of those products. And this is what makes it so powerful. In this image, we've got an image that I took here. We've got a number of images from a bunch of different photographers. Like I said, since I'm not a professional photographer and don't do clients anymore, I have people who shoot people contribute their images. So a lot from Sandy Putsch, a lot from Brooke Crystal, Sandy Foster, Sarah Miller. A number of people have loaned me their images that I use throughout. Hal and Victoria Schmidt from Light Workshops. Anyway, so here's an image in Photoshop, one that I took a long time ago. And this is something where I've normally taught dodging and burning. In this case, to go from here to here literally is a slider now. Never before have you been able to pull out shadow and highlight detail without artifacts. And that's what we're going to be talking about. It is a wow. This is a shot from St. Pete's Cathedral. You'll notice there's no people in it, therefore I took it. But this is before and after. Now, before this, you've been probably doing something what's known as high dynamic range imagery, or HDR. And the great thing is now with this, what's known as a 2012 processing engine in Lightroom 4 and Adobe Camera Raw 7, you're able to take an image like this, a single shot, and turn on the light, so to speak. And that's why you will, no longer going to be doing the bracketed shots like you've been using in the past, and also why you're probably going to be updating as soon as you leave this presentation, because it's so damn good. Especially when you have things like this, where you have motion. Here's a shot I took over in Molokai. You've got things in motion. A multiple shot HDR combination is difficult to do. This is a single shot before and after. So to maintain that without the artifacting is fantastic. We're also going to be talking about targeted adjustments. This actually is an iStock, a great shot from iStock stock photography, and before and after. In this case, we're targeting the light, shaping the light. We're going to be using the auto mask take capabilities for that. A Hal and Victoria Schmidt shot, before, after. We'll talk about black and white, color balance. This is another Hal and Victoria Schmidt shot, straight out of the camera, and enhanced in Lightroom or ACR. There's no Photoshop in here. If you've been going into Photoshop for all of this and been using third-party filters for skin softening, eye enhancement, all of those sorts of things, stop. A lot of this, not all of it, but a lot of it can be done right within Lightroom. And of course, anytime you don't need to go into Photoshop, your workflow is going to go up exponentially because you're not creating new files, you're not taking care of those, you're not doing layers, layer masks, adjustment layers, et cetera, et cetera. Even things like this, we've got a beautiful Brooke Crystal wedding shot. What we're going to do here is soften the background, in a sense, change the depth of field, and pop the bride. So right before and after, that's literally going to be 2 seconds in Lightroom. Okay? The fact that you can do that with our brushes is fantastic. They've also added the new white balance tool available within, we'll do it for you guys. We've also added the new white balance brush in Lightroom, and that's going to allow you to do unifying of skin tone in ways never before possible in Lightroom and ACR, because that's the issue when you have red skin issues in your image, is how can you balance those out with everything else in the file. In this case, simply using a white balance brush, we're going to be able to go from this to this. But then what we're going to do, we still have in this issue here, is we've got our, we'll call it 5 o'clock shadow. It may be a several day shadow. But what we're going to do is we're going to jump into Photoshop between here and use the shaving filter, which has been in Photoshop for 100 years, and none of you guys have known it. It's fantastic. You can do a lot of stuff in Photoshop. This, again, is another skin softening, blemish removal image done in Lightroom. There is no Photoshop here. So eye enhancement and skin. This is one of Sandy's favorites, the ability to get rid of glasses glare. Okay, and again, we're going to be using something in Photoshop that will allow you to do this literally in a matter of seconds, and it has been in Photoshop for over 100 years. This is going to be brand new to you all because it's in CS6. And what it is the new Content Aware Move tool. And this is a great, I'll show you the full figure when we get to it, the full shot. This is a Sandy Foster shot, a wonderful Texas photographer who focuses on yoga. But what we wanted to do is center the yogini underneath the background element, and we're simply going to move her over and have it recreate the background for us. Those sorts of things are huge time savers. When you have almost the perfect shot, okay, great shot, a little bit of an attitude adjustment maybe, but mainly it's just a posture thing, right? There's no weight loss needed in here. So we'll optimize the image, and then we'll do a little tummy tuck using Liquify. The new Liquify in CS6 with the updated one. This is another Sandy Foster shot, and in this case what we're going to do is we're simply going to straighten the head, or any body part, or move them around, and that's going to be Puppet Warp. Puppet Warp came in the last version of Photoshop, and we're just simply going to do that. It's not a rotation of the head, it's a straightening of the head, and it takes about 2 seconds, but if you don't know Puppet Warp, it is a little intimidating, and we'll give you tips on that. Another favorite of Sandy's, this is a portrait shot, another Brooke Crystal shot, and the head swap. To be able to do that literally in, yeah. Very useful for entertaining small children and photographers. We'll use the same thing that we do for the glare removal to swap out heads. Okay, and of course you need to do pano stitching. For those of you who haven't been shooting panos, you should be. It is new and improved, especially with our adaptive wide angle in the new Photoshop. Back in Lightroom, we're going to do antiquing special effects. We're going to be doing some high key and selective color effects. To go from this to this literally is about 2 seconds. You'll be able to do this. You'll make a preset, and then you'll fine-tune it, in this case, by bringing back the blues. We'll do that literally in about 2 seconds. There's no hand tinting or anything else in this file. Okay, same thing with this one, this sort of targeted recoloring. We'll do it in Lightroom, not Photoshop. And of course, everything we do in Lightroom can also be done in Adobe Camera Raw 6. The develop module in Lightroom is the same, and we'll come back to you guys. The develop module in Lightroom is the same as the processing engine in Adobe Camera Raw 7. Okay, and again, more selective color. Hand tinting, we'll see how much of these we can sneak into those of you watching at home. Cross-processing effects. To be able to do this is brand new to the new Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw because of the new access to color channels. When you do need Photoshop for filtering, we'll talk about Photoshop integration. We have the ability to now do little oil paints right within Photoshop CS6. This is the new oil paint filter, but we're going to do this one with a smart filter recipe. So literally, when you come up with a recipe like I've done here, you'll drag it from one photograph to another, and it'll automatically do all the painting, the sketching, everything else associated with it automatically. Okay, and when you do need to go over the top and you can't do certain glamorizing within Lightroom, we'll talk about that in Photoshop. This also is a smart filter recipe. This is not multi-steps. Once you do it once, that's again one of my mantras. If you've done something once and you like it and it's cool and groovy, figure out how to never do it again. There's no reason for you to be doing the same bloody thing over and over again, image after image. And if I did a show of hands and asking how many of you work one image at a time, fine-tuning every image at a time, you would be depressed. So anyway, okay. Back to, let's see here. And of course, one of the greatest things about both the new Lightroom and the new Adobe Camera Raw, not the new Adobe Camera Raw, this is a feature that's specific to Lightroom and to Photoshop CS6, and that's the ability to take anything that you do to a file, almost anything, a lot of what you can do in the develop module, and apply it to video. And then take that video, bring it into the new Photoshop, which now edits video, and you can, of course, add filters and everything else to your video, and you can go from something like this to something like this in video, and we're going to be showing that as well. Okay, with that in mind, let us get going. You guys have been very patient. Here is an original shot. We're going to further drive home this point. A shot over in the lagoons of Moorea in Tahiti. And this is it tweaked in Lightroom. Okay, single shot tweaked using the new one. Over the top, yes, I know. I am definitely not subtle. But going into Photoshop, here we've got the same image, and this is how you used to do it. So you've had our original. You'd have a secondary exposure. Okay, so here we've got a secondary exposure through a layer mask, right, to be able to blend these two images together to maintain our highlight detail. We have a curves layer here to pull out detail within the canoe. We've got another shadow highlight layer to pull out more detail. I'm using a soft light to add density to my midtones. I've got a high-pass popping filter here to bring out edge detail. I've got a little halo layer here to do a little bit of vignetting. I've got a separate sharpening layer here because you want different sharpening for different outputs, whether it's a coated or an uncoated stock. So you have to do that on a separate layer for your different items. Then if you want a black and white, and then if you want a tint, you've got a dozen layers here. That's the point that we're going to be driving home today, is that there's no reason for you to do that workflow ever again. 90% of your work should be able to be done in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw. Okay, and how are we going to do that? Well, what we're going to do, and again, we're here in Lightroom. We'll bring up a few of our panels here. We're going to start off with what I call my 4-step, or now 5-step tango. Okay, 5-step tango to quickly and easily optimize your color and tone for all your images. So I would recommend writing these down, because you will be tested on them afterward. And you know that what I'm giving you at the end of the show is based upon how well you test and how much you laugh, and you guys are already doing extremely well with the laughing part. Okay, first off, white balance and crop. That's if needed. As mentioned by Sandy earlier on when she was talking about shooting workflow, if you can white balance in camera, do it. If you're a studio shooter, there's no reason in the world ever to shoot a shot that's not as close to perfect as possible, including white balance. But if you're shooting out in the field and it's definitely a wrong white balance, you're shooting under mixed light or something else like that, then definitely fix white balance, because that does affect your histogram. Your tonal range is based upon your white balance. So you'll fix that. 2, crop, as Sandy mentioned. If there's something in your scene that you know you're going to crop out that has a different tone than the rest of your image, a different exposure. If you've got a bright white window you know you're going to crop out, there's a dark shadowed tree you're going to crop it out before you start. Not because you're worried about the aspect ratio, but because removing that tone will give you an accurate histogram, and that will allow Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw to do its magic. Speaking of Adobe Camera Raw, what we have here is the Adobe Camera Raw interface, and here you can see the basic module. Okay, we are in the basic module, as it were, the basic tab within Adobe Camera Raw, and you can see that these settings here mimic the basic panel over here in Lightroom. Okay? They are the same settings. So anything that I show you within Lightroom is applicable to Adobe Camera Raw, specifically the new Adobe Camera Raw 7 that ships with CS6. Okay, so back here to our crop. It's the white balance that we're concerned about, because the first step after white balancing crop, if necessary, is auto, with a potential undo smiley face, if needed. And what auto is going to set is your black and white point for you. It's going to set the dynamic range. It is a computer, it is an algorithm. It may not do the basic mid-tone correction for you because it doesn't know what you shot. It doesn't know what you're going for, high key, low key, night, whatever. It doesn't know. But it does set your black and white point and often your contrast and things like that very well. If it doesn't, if it says makes a stab and it's so completely off that it's not useful, then undo. Command or Control Z and move on. Okay, but that auto you're going to find is actually going to help you a lot. Because the third step in this tango of setting your exposure, clarity, shadow, and highlight is actually going to be based upon the fact that you've already got a good tonal range set in the file. And this is where we have to do a little bit of explanation, because if you're used to the old Lightroom or used to the old Camera Raw, you're going to notice, and here we're going to jump right over to our Lightroom interface. Now we have different sliders. Okay? Recovery and fill light are gone. Highlight and shadows are now take their place, but they really don't take their place. It's very different in terms of how they work. Okay? Exposure now is completely different. Exposure used to be your white point. It's now your middle point or your mid-tone exposure. In other words, exposure now means exposure. People were using exposure when they shouldn't have been touching it because it was their white point. So Adobe has gone to great lengths to basically reshape all these different sliders and what they do, and specifically the main benefit is, I have to you have to have eye contact here, because the main benefit here is what they've done in the new processing engine is re-engineered the way that the transitions between these different quadrants of your tonal range are mapped out, as it were. The transition, say, between a 3/4 shadow tone and your midtones, where you used to have be a little bit cautious when you went from one area to another to not get in artifacts, now is mind-bogglingly improved to the point where, again, you're not going to be doing a lot of hand dodging and burning in images that you used to in the past. So, I've also got here, you'll notice that in terms of this tango, I've got exposure, clarity, shadow, and highlight. And you almost have to do these all at one time. And there's no set order on these because depending upon your image. I'll mention exposure because that's your middle tone. That's when you hit auto. Exposure is your middle tone. It is your basic exposure now. You can go ahead and use that for your overall brightness. Clarity is right up here because clarity now has been completely changed. And now is going to allow you to do a huge amount of popping of your image. It still is basically edge contrast, but because it can pull out so much detail in your file, so much so that it actually can increase the contrast in your shadows and start to plug them up almost. You may want to do clarity earlier on in your tango because you have shadow now, shadow and highlight, which is phenomenal at pulling back shadow and highlight detail. So if you get a little carried away with the clarity to make your image pop, you can then use your shadow to bring back that detail that was lost, either in the original file or because you got carried away with clarity. Highlight is going to be that upper portion of your tonal range, and again, it's able to pull out a huge amount of information that you probably thought was long gone. And the transition between something like your shadows and highlights is where you're going to see a huge benefit in the new Lightroom engine and Adobe Camera Raw engine. Whites and blacks literally are your whites and black points. And the nice thing about whites and blacks, and again we'll come back over here, is that they now start in the middle. In the end, in the past version, they started over here on the left-hand side, and you could only, move them in one direction. Now because they and actually all your settings start in the center, you can lighten or darken any of these quadrants in your tonal range. And that also gives you a huge amount of control in your image. Okay. Last but not least, vibrance, which is your intelligent saturation. Very, very cool. And that's kind of self-explanatory to pull out color in your image. Vignette. I've never put vignette in a optimizing stage in terms of working with your images. It's always been an enhancing step because, let's face it, it's an effect. Okay? It's not part of your original shot. The reason why I'm putting it into the tango now is because you're able to pull in so much shadow information by using the shadow recovery slider. What we do as photographers is constantly use shadows, right, to throw things into the background because they're a distraction. And because of that, you're actually getting too much detail in your shadows. Okay, you want to pull out, say, shadows in the hair of your model or the eyes of your model. The problem is that background's going to get the same detail as the model's eyes. So by taking advantage of vignette, where you can throw the background back into the background where it belongs, as long as you know that you have 3 different vignettes available within Lightroom. And actually, if you add the flavors of one of them, you have 6 different vignettes available for you in Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. You actually can use vignettes, I think, in a very, very practical manner. Okay, so let's get going on that. Here is an image. I've shot this image. This is a Brooke Crystal wedding trash the dress shot. Used it for ages. I've used it to teach dodging and burning. I've never taught it on how to fix this image with a slider. So let's go through that tango. The first step, white balance in crop. I'm not going to crop. It's already pretty much full frame and set. I am going to take advantage of our little gray eyedropper over here in our basic tab of the Develop module within Lightroom. We'll do shortcuts and tips and techniques after the audience is gone. We're just going to get right into it here. What you do is you pull it into the file and you just hover it around until you see something that you like in terms of a result. You're looking for a neutral, what should be a neutral white, gray, or black. And that's one of the great things about Lightroom is it has this navigator panel in the upper left-hand corner, which is also a preview. So as I hover my cursor over within the file, you'll notice that it's actually changing the white balance. If I move over a skin tone, you can see that's probably not a good neutral tone. I'm just going to click on the bride's dress, click, and I did a white balance. So that's basically the concept. You should have something like a color passport, X-ray color passport in the scene, but for some reason, Brooke was not able to get a Greytag Macbeth color chart into this shot before it happened. I don't know, something about once in a lifetime. Okay, so we've done white balance. We don't need crop. What's our first step after that? Auto. I'm going to click auto, and you may have a one-step tango. Okay, you don't get extra points in heaven for doing more work than you need to. I've checked with the big guy. It's okay. But we are going to continue because we're going to be able to pull out a lot. But right now, that's the before and after of white balance and auto. But what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of, I'm going to jump right to that clarity because we have all sorts of subtle details in the highlights. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pull up my clarity slider, and you're going to see how much detail is actually in the shadow and highlight details in this file. You'll notice that the clarity can go up and down. We're going to do clarity down for skin softening in a second, but for right now we're far enough away from the bride's face. We're going to take it up to make it pop. You can see her dress being pulled off. Okay, pulled off, meaning it's off the background. There is not a dress pull-off slider in Lightroom. I'm going to go to highlights, also part of that next step of the tango. You're going to also see that I can pull out a lot of detail. In this case, I want to keep it subtle, okay? So I can pull out a little bit more detail. But the shadow slider over here, this is where things get exciting, because with the shadow slider, you're able to pull out detail. In this case, a brunette, bride, and you're able to pull out detail that in the past would have only been possible using something like dodging and burning techniques. So we'll take that up. The last step of this portion of the, well, and actually that's it. We've got our, I'm not going to worry about exposure. I think the exposure was fine, set with auto. The contrast is usually fine, set by auto. I like that. The whites and the blacks, in this case, that's the next step of our tango. I'm going to say that's pretty good. If I wanted to, I could take maybe those whites down a little bit. It actually brought it up more than it was necessary. Okay? But that is fine. So again, that auto, that's why we use auto. It really does do a great job as long as you understand what's going on here. Okay. Maybe we'll take that exposure down a little bit for our midtones and maybe a little bit more up on our shadows. The next step was vibrance and vignette. Now we'll get to vignette in a second, just to bug Sandy. But in this case, we're going to go with vignette and we'll say we're done for our tango. Okay, so here is our before, after, before, after. Okay, so far so good? Good. Okay. Continuing on. Let's do a few of these real quick so you know. We're going to hit auto. Great. Maybe a one-step tango, move on. If not, we'll do a little bit of our clarity. So I can go jump right to clarity in terms of our work here. You can see how much I'm able to do. It's a guy. I can get away with murder. I don't need any shadow. It automatically did the shadow and highlight for me. Maybe a little bit of vibrance. So in this case, the tango was auto, clarity, vibrance, and we're done. That should be illegal. You shouldn't be able to do that. In this case, it's also a JPEG file. Okay, so this is pulling out that much detail from a JPEG. Okay. And here it is with a little bit of vignette added to it as well if you want to do that portion of the tango. Okay, let's do this shot. This is a wonderful shot from Hal and Victoria Schmidt, like I said, at Light Workshops, where I teach over in Morro Bay, California. And a beautiful shot. It's right, I mean, it's great out of the camera. I mean, what's wrong with it? It's just almost perfect right now. But we are going to do our tango to it, and we're going to see how far we can push it. So again, white balance looks good. Don't need to crop it. As Andy mentioned, don't crop if you don't need to, because you want to have that flexibility to sell different aspect ratios to your client, so there's no reason to do that now. I'm going to jump right into the tango, so I'm going to hit auto. This is where people have probably used auto and gone, yeah, that doesn't quite work for me, undo, and you've never been back. And that was 20 years ago, you touched auto, and you've never tried it again. You're right, it actually did a lot right there, way over board in terms of things like exposure. But I'm going to use this as a starting point just to show you how we can use those next steps in the tango. So I'm going to use our exposure to reset my middle tone value. Okay. And in this case, I'm going to give you an advanced technique, since you guys are already obviously way advanced users. And I'm going to use that clarity, so I'm going to use that again. That's our third step of the tango. If we take it up, it is going to do a lot of popping. Not so much for portraits, especially with women. If you're doing the football team, senior portraits, then knock yourself out and get all grungy. But in this case, I'm going to take the clarity down, and you're going to notice the skin softening that takes place with a little anti-clarity. The problem with clarity is that it softens too much. If you get carried away, you'll notice that the eyes are going to get soft, the lips are going to get soft. It is softening the skin tone and softening the highlights, but we're going to leave that just for now. We're going to say that that's okay, because I'm going to show you something. And something I'm going to show you is that you're going to remember that these are just mathematical equations. The great thing about Lightroom is it is a procedural processor. It is not a pixel pusher like Photoshop. Photoshop, what order you do things is very important, because as you start changing color and tone in a file, in a sense you're degrading it. If you say, I want this brighter, you're throwing away pixels and changing them. In Lightroom, these are just sliders. If you say, I want an anti-clarity of 75%, we'll go crazy. You can go back and add a plus 75% of clarity in a targeted tool, and it will remove them. It doesn't degrade it. It's not like you softened it and blurred it and threw away information. All you did was say, I want this numeric value applied here. I can change that by applying an anti-adjustment on the other end, in this case using something like the adjustment brush. You're going to see that. We're going to use that throughout. That is incredibly powerful. So I'm going to do a little anti-clarity there. We'll maybe do a little bit of vibrance. And then I am going to use that vignette, the last step of the tango, where I'm going to come down. In this case, I'm going to go right to the effects panel. There are other vignettes, but I'm going to go right to the effects panel. And I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to do this post-crop vignette. And I'm going to take that down. We'll start off with taking it down, and you can see why I'm using it. What was a light background, I can now throw into the background and get rid of it as a distraction. Okay? You have multiple ways of doing your post-crop vignette. My favorite is color priority. It's more subtle than the highlight priority. But with both of those, you actually have a highlight slider, so you can actually pull back in highlights. If you'll notice the model's arm, I can actually pull that back in. That was the no-no that Sandy mentioned, why you have to be careful with your vignettes. If you muddy up your highlights by using a vignette, that ain't pretty. What you're going for is kind of a dodging and burn effect. Okay? So here is a little dodge and burn effect. So there's our last step of our tango. There's our before, after, before, after. Now that's too soft because of that clarity. So let's just jump right over to an advanced technique, and we're going to jump right over to our adjustment brush. And the one thing you're going to notice as soon as we open up the adjustment brush is it basically has the same sliders as our develop module, meaning whatever you do globally, you can now do targeted in a brush, including white balance, including shadow resuscitation, including sharpness, noise, and moire reduction, brand new to the new Lightroom. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take that clarity all the way up to 100. And if I took out 75 everywhere, and now I'm putting plus 100, what's going to happen when I paint with this brush? I will get a plus 25. In other words, I'll get the full detail of the file, okay? But I'm also going to be able to get addition to it. And let me get rid of, I'm using that little green thing there to highlight where my cursor is. I'm also going to tap the O key. Okay, the O key in Lightroom. The O key happens to be the Y key in Adobe Camera Raw, and that's your preview of your mask. Okay, because when you paint, you want to be able to see where you're painting, or at least I do. You don't want to start painting, especially when you're doing subtleties like sharpening or other tone work. You may not know exactly where you're going. So tapping the O key is going to give you the preview of the mask. Shift O is going to cycle you through different options for the colors of your mask. There's your little emo mask right there. Thank you for that, love. But, so that gives you different colors. in Adobe Camera Raw, you can actually choose whatever color you want. You have a color picker for your mask. Okay, so I'm going to just come over here. I'm going to click on the eyes and the lips, and that's all I'm going to do. And as you can see, that's about as ugly a mask as you could ever create. Tap on the O key again, and I'll tap the H key to hide that little dot, that little pin that shows you where your adjustment was. By the way, that is one other difference in Adobe Camera Raw. It's the V key for visualize in Adobe Camera Raw to hide those pins. It's the H key in Adobe Lightroom to hide the pins there. And now what we're going to do is look at our file with our new clarity applied. So here is our before, after, before, after. So we're able to pull back in all those details that were in the eye. I'm going to do one other thing that I'm going to do here as well. Going back to our basic tab, you can remember in our basic tab that we've got all this shadow. We've pulled in 50 clicks of the shadow, term shadow detail. I can do the exact same thing with the brush. I can come over here to my adjustment brush, say new, okay, reset it. I'm going to double click on the word effects, and now I can take that shadow back down. So in other words, that shadow detail where I pulled out, as I mentioned, when you use that shadow slider, you can pull out too much information. If I do a minus 50, I'm actually negating that portion of the filter. The nice thing is that I can now do it in a targeted fashion. So if I want to throw her neck back where it was before that slider, I can just click over here, and even without using a mask, you'll notice because it's already targeted to shadows. That's what the slider does. It just does shadows. I can do that on her neck. Okay. Let's go back. Okay. To our image here. We got a little carried away with our history. So we've got our the shadow on her neck. By simply coming up here, I can take that back and throw it back into the distance. Okay. So before, after, before, after. Okay. And I think that I definitely did go over the top with our clarity to begin with. So let's take that back. So now we've got some skin softening, and we've also got our eye enhancement. One last thing about the eye enhancement, let's go back to the adjustment brush for a second and look at this pin. One thing that often happens with a scene, especially if you're outside, your eye color can get an ambient color cast, right? Blues if it's reflecting the sky, or it may be a yellow because of just some sun scarring on the tissue of the eye. That's one great thing about the new white balance capabilities within the brush, within ACR and Lightroom, is that you can just add a little bit of the opposite of what you have too much of. So you can add just a little bit of yellow to get rid of the blue ambient light in the eyes. Okay. So let's also do one other effect. Actually, if we like this right here, anytime you see something you like, immediately come over to your snapshot screen and take a snapshot. I've already got a few snapshots here, as you can see. Snapshots are also in Adobe Camera Raw if you haven't been using them. You simply click on it. We'll click on it. I don't even bother naming it. And I've now saved that for posterity. So I can always get back to that image. Okay? Now I want to do a little high key effect to this image. So let's do another little treatment. We'll go back to our basic tab. And what I'm going to do here is we're going to first turn it into a black and white. We're going to tap the V key, is our shortcut for going right into black and white mode within Lightroom. And you go, actually, I like that right there. Thank you very much. I can sell that. Anytime you go, I can sell that, click your snapshot, and you've got that as an option. Later on, you can make virtual copies, and those will output. So again, I just have 2 copies, didn't do a save as, didn't have to save another copy, make snapshots. When you're done, you can use those to create files for output. I'm going to take my contrast all the way up, my highlights all the way down, my shadows all the way up, okay? And I'm going to take we'll balance out clarity, and let's actually take our exposure down, and we'll take our whites up. So what we're going to do, what we're doing is we're creating a high key effect using the same sliders that we used for the tango. And by taking our contrast way up, our highlights down. Our highlights are going down because that's allowing us to maintain the detail in the highlights rather than blowing them out completely. We certainly can if we want to, but when we're going to take our highlights down, we've pulled out all of our shadow detail over here. We've lightened up our whites dramatically. We're blacks, we can fine-tune to taste if we need to. And our clarity right here is something that we will do to taste as well, because taking it up is going to give us a very exaggerated edge look. Taking it down is going to give us a much softer, ghosted look. Both of those are totally viable. If that is something that you like there, clarity up, take a snapshot. In this case, I think I'm going to go clarity down. And then the last step of this high key is going to be balancing out our whites to taste. So I'm just going to balance out the whites until I get what I want. So what have I got here? Here's your sliders. Okay. Contrast 100%. Highlights minus 100%. Shadows 100%. Whites to taste. Clarity to taste. That's going to give you your high key effect. One of the ways of doing a high key, and I'll click another white balance tool. Okay. And since you guys are advanced, you guys are feeling advanced? Okay, so let's do one other thing, and we'll come back to a little high. One other thing that we can do related to this is we're going to do a targeted recoloring of the file. Okay, what we want to do is come up here and just selectively recolor portions of the file. In this case, we have got beautiful blue eyes on this model shot by Hal and Victoria. But I'm going to go over to my HSL panel where we normally do color, and then jumped right back into color because I clicked on HSL. And you notice right there they go, well, I might be able to sell that. I may want to, take over let's actually go over it. We'll leave it in this color, and we'll take our vibrance down. So now we've got a subtle color version of this file, high key. Sure, snapshot, why not? But let's go ahead, and we're going to go back to that HSL panel for hue, saturation, and luminance. And I'm going to do a little trick. I'm going to go over to the saturation portion, and I've actually got a preset that I've made that we'll use for teaching purposes. And in this case, it's what's known as a DSAT preset. All it is sliding all the sliders in saturation over to minus 100. That's all that it is, and then I saved a preset. I clicked over here on the preset tab, okay, and clicking on that allowed me to save it, and I saved it as a preset. The reason why I'm doing this rather than a black and white is because now I can go over here to the saturation sliders, and I can go to that blue slider, and I can go, would you please bring back in my blues? So that's where I mentioned before that you can do this sort of effect literally in half a second. Once you've got your high key, which we've already got our recipe, we can save that as a preset. But this idea of going back into an image and selectively bringing back in a certain color out of all the colors in your file is really, I think, powerful and makes for a potent little image. And again, you go, well, it's trendy and all that sort of stuff, and I don't do trendy. Well, that's true. The nice thing about trendy, in terms of telling a story, is sometimes you need something that's going to stop your client long enough for them to look at the image. Right? Every single person in the world now has a camera attached to their hip 24/7. Everybody's taking a photograph. Sometimes how you shape your storytelling of your images is what's going to set it apart. So a person says, yes, that's an interpretation of the scene. It's an interpretation of my daughter. It's an interpretation of something. And as soon as you do that, then they are justified in paying you your exorbitant price tag for your work. Because you as an artist have not only captured the moment, you've interpreted the moment. And sometimes that makes the big difference between why don't I have my daughter shoot this for me as opposed to a professional photographer. Okay, so let's go back in here, and we've got a few other samples we'll just show real quick for that same thing in terms of a targeted recolor. Okay, we'll do this same one. This is a Sandy Foster shot, another Yogini shot. We'll use this one later. We'll just tap on the DSAT. It's done. Saturation is on the tab. Well, in this case, we're going to use our little TAT tool built right into it. Click, and just click on the Yogini's little leotard, and there we're set. Okay, that's without optimizing it, doing the tango or anything else. If we want to, we could also come over here and shift the hue of that. If that really, she goes, I meant to use more of my coral color, or is meant to be purple. You just simply, I'm clicking and dragging right within the file to target the color. I can even come over to the luminance portion of the tab and come over here and make it more pastel, or if the clothing, I really want it to kind of blend into the skin tone, okay, or I want it to contrast the skin tone, I'm literally just coming over here and clicking and dragging within the file. Make sense? Okay? We're now in the HSL. We're taking advantage of targeted adjustments. Let's jump over. Speaking of, first off, we've got our little wonderful Brook Crystal attitude shot here. We're going to come over here and we'll do that tango again because you guys all know that. Auto, maybe done right there. We'll do a little shadow. We're far enough away and these people are good looking enough they can use a little plus clarity. We'll add our little plus vibrance. Okay, and we're done. Before, after, before, after. There's your optimizing, you're done. But except for this part. So let's jump over into, I wish I had his body. It's just he's just so laid back. Anyway, so we're going to right click on this, edit in Photoshop right here. So right click, that's another great tip for you. If in doubt, right click. Okay, so we're going to go right click, jump over into Photoshop. It's immediately going to bring our file up. The new Liquify is taking advantage of your graphic processing engine, graphic processing card. So you can now just go right into Liquify. In the past, you'd probably go in there and select just a portion of your image. What I want to talk to you about here in Liquify are two things. First off, the new Liquify has this new interface over here on the right-hand side. Okay? It's been streamlined. It's great. It's awesome. It's very nice of Adobe to streamline it. The problem is that they left off one of the most potent capabilities in the tool, and that is over here on the left-hand side. Okay? Once you click on Advanced Mode, you're going to come over here and find out that you have at your disposal the Freeze and Thaw Mask tool. And if you don't know how to use those, you don't know how to use Liquify. So I'm going to immediately, before I even start moving any pixels around, I'm going to come over here and use the Freeze Mask tool at 100%. And we're going to take our brush down just a little bit excessive right there. And the main thing that you want to do is protect the areas in your image that you don't want to move. That's the secret, is you need to be able to go in. Sandy showed you a shot where the hand got liquefied at the same time that a belly got liquefied. In this case, by protecting those areas, you're going to be able to come up here and now move here without moving the arm. You say, well, I just use a little small brush. Well, you've found if you use a little small brush, you get a little serrated edge and it's not pretty. So that takes us to what settings do we use for the actual liquefying process. We're going to go back to our main brush, and here the one thing you want to remember is taking down your brush density and pressure, so you're working a little bit more subtle in terms of your adjustments. You're going to have a lot more control if you do that. The next thing is that you're going to want to increase your brush size. Okay? You want your brush size big as possible, because you want it to do one adjustment, one fell swoop, or as minimal the number of adjustments as is possible. So I'm going to come over here, and I've got a big brush, and the other tip I'm going to give you is do not use the edge of the brush, use the center of the brush. Okay? And that's going to allow you to control your tweak. So I've got a big brush, soft density, soft pressure, cursor in the center, and I'm just going to move over my offending portion. And remember, what you've got here is a gravity situation. So typically you're pushing in and up. Okay? And there we're set. That's all you need to do. There's our adjustment. Okay? Before, after, before, after. Okay? You close the file. You close the file here. It doesn't, of course, ask you to save it or name it or where do you want to put it. It brings it back into Lightroom, and it's there waiting for you. That's the great thing about the integration of Photoshop and Lightroom. In Adobe Camera Raw, of course, you'd be jumping into Photoshop from within Adobe Camera Raw and then saving it back out to wherever your other images are. Okay. And let us do, we need to do the glasses glare real quick. Actually, we're in Photoshop. Ending up with this real quick. We've got our shaving filter we'll do for Grandpa here. Shaving filter that a lot of people don't know. We opened up Grandpa's shot as a smart object from within Lightroom by right-clicking on it. That means we can apply filters non-destructively and change them after the fact. We'll be spending a lot more time on that later on today. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump right over to a great filter. Filter, noise, Dust and scratches. Dust and scratches have been in Photoshop for 100 years. Oops, not median. Oh, that's a cool filter as well. Filter, noise, dust and scratches. What dust and scratches does is it gets rid of light and dark elements in a scene, dust and scratches. Here we've got our 5 o'clock shadow. How you use dust and scratches is you come over here and increase the radius until the offending area disappears, and then you take the threshold up until you bring back in this case, subtleties like skin tone. So wow is exactly right, copyright trademark. So I'm able to bring back in the skin tone and get rid that. How much retouching would that take for you to do that manually, or using a patch tool, or using something else? It's been in Photoshop for 100 years. Nobody else has shared that with you because nobody loves you like I do. Okay, dust and scratches. Now, of course, it actually did an incredible job of softening a huge amount around the image. And I'm actually turning on and off the smart filter in the layers palette. You'll notice that that filter is actually tucked up inside of the layer that I applied it to now because of the smart filter technology. So I can turn on and off the eye for it, to the visibility of that effect. Okay? But it softened some areas too much, specifically around the eye. But in other areas, it actually is really nice in the sense that it got rid of all sorts of little anomalies in the skin. You look at all the little spider veins and everything else that it also got rid of. So I want to use it selectively. So what I'm going to do is take advantage of the fact that you get a free, no-cost, no-obligation layer mask built into every smart filter. And I'm simply going to come over here and I'm going to click on my good old-fashioned regular paintbrush tool. I'm going to definitely take advantage of my Wacom Intuos tablet. I've got the new Intuos 5 over here, which is rocking. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to use, first off, I'm going to invert that mask and apply the sharpening, apply it where I want to. Okay, rather than apply everywhere and take it out where I don't want it, I'm going to reverse that mask, hide everything. I'll use a shortcut of Option or Alt Delete to fill with my foreground color. So now I've brought back in all my beard. Everything is back because I've hidden that filter by using the mask. So what I'm going to do here is take a white-filled paintbrush at 100%, just a good old-fashioned one, and I'm simply going to, making funny noises with my lips, do my shaving of Grandpa here. Okay? I'm also then going to use a reduced version of that brush to soften a lot of little anomalies all throughout the file. So I'm going to come over here, change the opacity of my brush to 50%, and now I can soften up all sorts of little anomalies around Grandpa. Okay? Forehead. I can even, if I want to, take it and soften little distractions like flyaway hair and things like that by just doing it all over that background. So I've ended up with the world's ugliest mask. But that ugly mask was able to get me real far in terms of getting rid of bothersome elements within the image in terms of not only the hair, but also things like little skin anomalies. Let's do the same little thing right now on glass glare, taking advantage of masking in Photoshop. Okay. So what we have is we've got two different shots here, and here's the secret to getting rid of glass glare. You take the shot, you get the pose, you get the element, you get the moment, you get the personality. Great, awesome, love it, perfect. Could you just hold 1 second and take off your glasses, look here, thank you, click, got it. You don't have to match the pose, you don't even have to match the expression. You just want the basic same shot, and what you're going to do, in this case, totally different shot, different cropping, different angle. Okay? Now, of course, what you do now is select these and use opacity or the difference blend mode and spend an hour and a half trying to align the files. What you don't know is that in Photoshop, for 100 years, there's been auto-align layers, which is freaky, amazingly cool. Auto-align layers, I'm going to just simply here go auto. You don't need vignette control, vignette removal, or geometric distortion, just auto. You hit OK, and even though those images aren't anywhere close to being aligned, they are now. So simply you're going to come up here, add your layer mask, and we're going to come up here, and take our good old-fashioned paintbrush, okay, and we'll set it up here, and you just fix your glass glare, okay? Put in whatever you want. Okay, so there is your before, after, before, after. Okay, you can even fine-tune it if. Okay, so there is our before. You get the idea. Okay, and in terms of head swapping, let's do another one real quick since we're on this subject of Photoshop integration. And we're going to come over here to our little kids right here. Another Brook Crystal shot. We'll show you the entire scene. Two different croppings, two different alignments, okay, in terms of slanted horizon and not lining up. Let's just show you, again, they're different scales even. Okay. So what I'm going to do is shift-click between the two images, different scale, different rotation, different posing, edit, auto-align layers, auto, thank you very much. Remember to be polite. If Photoshop's not working, it's because you're copying an attitude, not because it's buggy. Okay? If you didn't know that, that's true. So we're going to come over here, and we've got our now two images perfectly aligned. Okay? So now we're going to take this one. We'll actually take our little crabby girl on the left-hand side, and actually, we like her. So what we want to do is do the same thing. We'll click on a layer mask. We got our black paintbrush, and we drop in our new attitude. Okay? Are you kidding? You're welcome. I would like to take credit for programming this, but obviously I didn't. Tapping your X key obviously exchanges your foreground and background, and there is your image. Okay? Okay? You can fine-tune that in terms of placement, but that is your basic head swap, and we will cover that more when we go this afternoon. Let's see if we can fit in one more. This one, actually, I have to show you the content-aware move. Another great shot from Sandy Foster. Love this shot. As I mentioned, she focuses on yoga shots. So we're going to take this one. It's perfect, amazing, except there's that situation, and this happens a lot. You just want to move her over, right? You want it perfectly centered. We're talking about perfection. You've gotten the moment. You can't change that moment. You can't say, okay, could you do that same pose? Just move it a foot over, because she probably did 50 poses. So I'm going to simply come over here. I'm going to take our quick select tool. I'm going to come over here and do a really rough selection. Okay, really rough selection. If you haven't been using the quick select tool, you should be using it. It is awesome. And in terms of not only selecting but refining, we'll do this down here. We'll do a little bit more in the hand. And the trick to using content-aware move, and now Adobe has pretty much created content-aware everything. Okay, they've got content-aware coffee mugs, content-aware. They have done a huge amount with content-aware technology. Is you're going to come up here and go select, modify, expand, and we're going to give it like 30 pixels. You need to grab quite a bit around it with this sort of thing. What we want to do is we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to ask Adobe, please move her over, blend her into the background, and then completely retouch the background where she used to be and turn it into the bricks in the foreground. If that could do that, that would be really, really, the technical term is bitchin'. So I'm going to come over here, content aware. We're going to end with this and let you guys go to lunch. I'm going to click and drag. Okay, we have to tell it to sample all layers. Oh, the other thing up here is very strict on something like this. We want to tell it the default setting, okay, is medium. I'm going to go very strict. I'm using a nice big wide, in this case a 30 pixel, expansion of the selection. I'm using very strict for adaptation. In this case, I like doing it to an extra layer so it doesn't touch my original, because I'm kind of a freak about control issues. So sample all layers, and now I'm going to simply shift drag until she's perfectly centered in this beautiful composition. Hit the return key. And it just made that. It moved her, blended her in, changed that, and changed from this to this. Okay? That ability to get the perfect shot, especially when you're working in situations where it's so close. I just want that symmetry. Anyway, that's what we can cover for this few minutes here. I'm going to turn it back over to Sandy for a second, and then I'll let you guys take lunch in a second.
All right, you guys. Honestly, isn't that amazing? Now, for you all, you are only at, that was not even quite an hour, so you get to sit through several more hours of Jack, so that's the good news. So thank you. Yeah, honestly, the stuff that's coming is even more mind-blowing. So I just sit there and I'm just amazed. And I know we tried to cram in a lot right now, but now he's going to slow it down and go through it even more in depth. So hopefully you will really enjoy that. Now, I do want to thank all of you, and especially our virtual audience out there. I know there are hundreds of you literally watching online, so hopefully you enjoyed the show and you had a good time. Now, the question is always, how can I see more? You can go to sandypuchtours.com, and you can check out the tour shows that are left on this tour. We're about a third of the way done. If we're not coming to your area, you can check out youcandu.com. That's UKANDU.com, and we have the pre-sale of the video available there. So you can watch it at your own time, your own pace, and actually watch this at home and try and practice these things over and over. I do want to send a big thank you out to our sponsors once again. As you know, we could not do this without them. So a big shout out to Canon, Adobe Bay Photo, Fineo, Silver Lake, and so many more. We cannot name them all, but the big ones really helped us get here. And the rest of them really help us showcase the best of what there is out there. Now, I have some incredibly fun giveaways. The first thing we're going to do is give away that membership to SPU. Tonight, we have a special deal. You actually get the free DVD. It's over $2,000 worth of my favorite templates that we sell to clients. So we're going to be giving away one here. And for those of you who are still tuning in, if you go to my fan page on Facebook, you actually can post what you loved about Jack's show, and we'll be giving away several memberships there. So the newest member here at the show is number 6. Who's number 6? Congratulations. Come on up here. You get the SPU hug. Come on all the way up. You got to hop up here, because I got to give you the SPU hug. So welcome to the family. We're so glad to have you. You are about to be part of an incredible opportunity to grow your business. So hopefully you will enjoy that. All we need to do is go out to that table right there, and Katie will get you all hooked up. You're also going to get that free DVD, so you're going to get all those templates. So thank you. Good energy. All right. Now, of course, I love SPU at Sandy Puch University, but I have 2 other things that somebody in this audience is going to be really thrilled to get. We actually have a copy of Adobe Lightroom that somebody's going to walk away with. She says, I want that. And a copy of Photoshop CS6. So somebody's going to be walking away with that. We're going to give that away right now. And for those of you who are viewing it, if you're still paying attention, go to Facebook. Tell us why you love the show. We're going to be giving away 2 copies there as well. So you're crazy not to do that. Get over there to Facebook. All right, somebody cross your fingers. It's about to be your time. All right, this is going to go out to lucky number 16. This is a copy of Lightroom. And the information you need is on the card. Congratulations, you now have Lightroom 4. And this is the big drum roll, please, you guys. Woohoo! All right, we're going to go for a higher number here. Let's try lucky number 22. Yeah! You now own CS6, so congratulations. Thank you, thank you. All right, as you can see, people are very excited to be here. Now, we have hundreds, literally thousands of dollars worth of products we're giving away, everything from backgrounds to albums to all these great Photoshop tools. We do want to thank the vendors again for being so generous. Without them, we couldn't do this. So please, if you get a chance, those of you who win especially, please go to their Facebook sites and let them know that you appreciate them, because honestly, I can't get free stuff for you if you don't say thank you. So please do that. All right, guys, now what we're going to do is we're going to go to a quick little 15-minute break, and then we're going to get back to Jack. You've got several more hours to go, so thank you guys so much. Let's give Jack a big thank you. Woohoo! All right, and see you guys later at home.